The dust has begun to settle in the James Harden trade situation, and we're beginning to have a clearer picture of the Sixers' outlook from here. So we know the trade, we know the details at this point in time. Still some moving parts as far as the draft picks and all the trade exceptions, the more complicated factors of things. But it does not seem like the Sixers are done just yet. I'm here to dive in this video about the future plans of the Sixers and why another blockbuster trade may just be in order. Now, before I dive fully into it, I do want to make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. That at this point in time, 81.2% of you guys watching this video have not subscribed to the channel just yet. The Sixers season is in full swing. Sixers Digest is going to be here every step of the way, and I want the Digest family to keep growing. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, ringing that bell, and not missing out on any content. And there's even more all the reason to, as the James Harden saga is finally over. So we saw the breaking news from Adrian Wojnarowski that started off the morning. In the middle of the night, we getting this alert and everything going down. But there are future plans involved with these Sixers. We know in this deal that there were kind of the more, I guess, around the edges pieces and complementary players coming back. The Marcus Morris, the Nick Batum, the Robert Covington, all guys that I do think are going to be useful to the Sixers roster, but not necessarily the type of players that make or break your championship chances. Now we get another report breaking in from Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated saying that 76ers could potentially be interested in Zach Lavine and OG Anunoby. Now we're starting to talk. I do think that the biggest thing that this deal did was provide flexibility for these Sixers. That by kicking the can down the line, getting rid of the James Harden saga, restocking the cabinet with assets by adding draft picks, by adding tradable contracts and pieces, they can now take a true look at what the picture is. By doing this deal now, by making this move, you have a chance to truly evaluate the roster up until the trade deadline and figuring out what this team is missing. That we know Tyrese Maxey is off to a red-hot start to the season, and you can check out quite a few videos that I already have diving into that. But now, is that legit? Is he ready to be a number 2 on a championship contending team? That's a lot to ask for a guy who's about to turn 23 this week. And while the early signs could not be more encouraging, it is fair to take a step back, let this play out over the course of the season, and see if that truly is legit. So if that happens, and if it's not, let's say that they're, and my honest evaluation, I'm incredibly happy with what I've seen with Tyrese Maxey, but I do think that when everything is said and done, that this team may be a little bit short on ball handling. So by doing that, maybe you do attack a Zach Lavine, a guy that is comfortable playing on or off the ball. Or maybe there is another piece. A guy that I've brought up is Malcolm Brogdon, who's there likely for a cheaper price, and a guy that's very much attainable. He is sitting on that Portland roster, which is very much in the rebuilding state, and Brogdon is much more of a win-now piece. So maybe you can figure out what the team is missing, check that box, and go get it. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out is we've constantly heard about this cap space plan of the Sixers wanting to make sure that they have free agency money this offseason. All the contracts that the 76ers are receiving are expiring and do not impact their cap flexibility in 24-25. That means Philadelphia projects to have between 50 and 65 million in cap room next offseason. That is tough to do, and that is a unique position they're going to put themselves in as a contender with an MVP candidate, the reigning MVP of the league, an up-and-coming star in Tyrese Maxey, who can book a max contract right next to his name right now, and then plenty of space to get whoever they want next. Now, it isn't the cream of the crop free agent class when we think about the names that are going to be there. There's guys like Pascal Siakam. Klay Thompson is a name that is interesting to me as he's failed to reach an extension with the Warriors. But there's still some win-now pieces that could be very valuable to this team. And two of those, once again, are Zach Lavine and OG Anunoby. Now, OG is a guy that could potentially come through the free agent market. Zach Lavine is a guy that would need to be traded for. He's a guy that I thought could come into play with the James Harden situation, that as the Bulls are kind of blowing up, that James Harden could be kind of an out for them, that with that one-year deal, he will be a free agent at the end of this offseason, that trading Lavine for that 5 years for the 1 year of Harden is something I could have seen happen. Now, obviously, we're not in that spot. James Harden is now with the Clippers, but the Sixers still have that mindset of making sure they're attacking this free agent class, and that is the beautiful picture, that we're seeing Daryl Morey have a true chance to put his fingerprints on this roster. That when he got here, a lot of the moves that he's been forced to make have simply been undoing previous moves, that he simply had to jump in and make sure, whether it be trading Al Horford's contract to eventually bring in Danny Green, moves like that where he is undoing previous evils from this front office. Now, as we look ahead, let's take a look at the bigger picture. That you flash forward to the year 24-25, that Joel Embiid is the only player with a guaranteed contract. And even that Paul Reed contract, which we can see the guarantee, there are stipulations based on this year's result and the Sixers making it past the second round that this deal does become guaranteed. That was one of the tricks the Utah Jazz used to try and get Paul Reed so the Sixers would not match. The Sixers ultimately called it and did match this number. But the bottom line is you see all this money coming off the books. And I know this isn't everybody, but you dig down the entire roster, it's the rest is one-year deals as well. The Patrick Beverleys, the Kelly Oubres, all these guys. There is the option with Jaden Springer for 1 year beyond most of these guys, but you can see Marcus Morris, free agent ended this year. Tobias Harris, free agent ended this year. Nick Batum, free agent this year. Robert Covington, free agent. D'Anthony Melton, free agent. So there is plenty to work and plenty of flexibility for Daryl Morey to work with. So we can see the kind of concept by now, the type of roster that they are trying to build. It's very clearly Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and then 3-and-D wings. Is that enough? Is Tyrese Maxey dynamic enough to be that number 2 option and create as much as he's going to be asked to create over these next couple weeks? For starters, I'm encouraged that we're able to sit back and find out. We don't have to make this call right here today. Let's take a look. We got a season of basketball right in front of us for him to prove that he can do it, or if he can't, the Sixers would adapt to that plan. So that is exciting to me that we can sit back and look. But I do think that this is all about Daryl Morey jumping in and getting involved, that he did collect more assets. He has all these draft picks that will be sitting there in the closet. These Sixers have been a team over the past couple years that have not had these draft picks to work with. And for a part of me, I do believe draft picks are very much overvalued when it comes to the trade conversation. That you think about a first-round pick is not the same to every team. Even this Clippers first-round pick, this has very much potential to be a good pick or a bad pick, depending on how the future of the Clippers are. But from a value standpoint, it's very different. If the Clippers, if Kawhi, Paul George, and James Harden all walk, as they're all due to be free agents at the end of this year, then all of a sudden, that 2026 first-round pick, that looks pretty promising. That's going to be a bad team if they don't have any of these stars. However, if they all do stick around, and it does seem like that's the intentions of all of them, that's probably a pretty high playoff team, and that's going to be a pick in the 20s, which, while Tyrese Maxey was the 21st overall pick, is very much an outlier for a player of that stage of the draft to make that much of an impact. But what I do like is this is now, he has more steps to the plate. That Morey, for all the critiques that he's caught for trades, he just has not had that many assets to work with. These are now assets that he can flip in the direction that he wants. He can form this roster in the way that he believes to be fit, and the Sixers have a real chance at building a contender. It's been frustrating. It has not been the way that we have hoped from now, but it feels like we finally reached the point where Daryl Morey is able to do whatever he wants from a front office standpoint, that he has the freedom and the luxury and the assets to attack. That is when Daryl Morey's at his best, that he is a guy that is hungry to attract stars. He wants to make the big splashes, get the big names, and Philadelphia is a perfect spot to do that. That they are ready to embrace this. There's an MVP on this team in Joel Embiid, and Joel Embiid should have regained confidence in Daryl Morey by the process of him taking control with this. So to talk specifically about these two guys with Zach Lavine and OG Anunoby, I see the pros and cons of both of them. I've had a couple people mention to me on Twitter they think Zach Lavine would be repetitive next to Tyrese Maxey. I do see that argument to an extent, but I do think Lavine gets underrated as far as how elite he is with his off-ball motion, how good he has become as a shooter in a similar capacity to Maxey. And I also think that Lavine is comfortable playing in an off-ball role, that when you watch him in Chicago, he's not a guy that's dribbling the air out of the ball, needs it in his hands constantly. He has some really good cutting, some off-ball motion, the ability to create shots without having it in his hand. That's a very important skill in the NBA and in basketball in general, is making sure that you can maximize your results without having to create. We're seeing Maxey grow in this area with the two-man game with Joel Embiid, and I do see something with Lavine. That all this talk from Joel Embiid about wanting to be more of a playmaker, wanting to have more freedom, play more team-oriented basketball, you need players like Lavine to be able to move off ball, to be able to create shots without having it in their hand. To look at OG Anunoby, once again, very different style of player here, but I do see a fit for that. That one of the weaknesses of the Sixers that still has not been addressed is on the defensive side of the ball and having a true perimeter wing defender. Now, Robert Covington could theoretically be that. He's a guy that's cracked an all-defensive team before in his career, who's had some real positive flashes on that side of the floor, but he's also a little past his prime. He does have good size, standing about 6'7", got a wingspan slightly under 7'2". That is appealing, and he is going to get his chance for sure to guard the Jason Tatums, the Jaylen Browns. But OG Anunoby is absolutely at another level when it talks about the defensive abilities. And he's quietly developed into a really solid offensive player. I do think OG gets a little bit overrated in the conversation, that I don't think he's this up-and-coming, I guess, star in the way that many perceive him to be, that I think he's more or less kind of is who he is as a really good 3-and-D option, but those are really hard to find in today's NBA, and everybody wants them. So to add that to a mix with Embiid and with Maxey would be incredibly appealing to me. I think that's a perfect spot for OG, is as a third option offensively, a guy who still makes his money on the defensive end, and I could absolutely see that working as a trio here in Philadelphia. So as we sit back, there's still a lot to be in play for these Sixers. The bottom line is they have a lot more flexibility from here than they previously did, or I think anyone believed they truly would when looking at this James Harden situation. So we can all breathe a deep breath that it is over, and we can all stay on our toes waiting for what happens next. I don't think this is going to happen in a hurry. I think at the earliest, this is around the trade deadline, and I think it's probably more likely that this bleeds into the offseason. But the bottom line is Daryl Morey has some massive plans, and these Sixers are going to be here to deliver. Thank you guys for tuning in this video. Let me know your dream target for these Sixers in the comments. I want to hear it. Who is that long shot free agent or superstar that you want them to get on the phones and work? And other than that, make sure you guys are once again hitting that subscribe button, ringing that bell so not missing out on the content. My name is Sean Barnard, and I'll be with you every step of the way right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.